Hello and welcome to the channel, where today we are reading chapter 25 of Matthew's Gospel. We're reading from the Word on Fire Bible, and we have some special commentary today from Thomas Merton and Bishop Robert Barron. Then the kingdom of heaven will be like this. 10 bridesmaids took their lamps and went to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish and 5 were wise. When the foolish took their lamps, they took no oil with them, but the wise took flasks of oil with their lamps. As the bridegroom was delayed, all of them became drowsy and slept. But at midnight there was a shout, "Look, here is the bridegroom, come out to meet him." Then all those bridesmaids got up and trimmed their lamps. The foolish said to the wise, "Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out." But the wise replied, "No, there will not be enough for you and for us. You had better go to the dealers and buy some for yourselves." And while they went to buy it, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went with him into the wedding banquet, and the door was shut. Later the other bridesmaids came along, saying, "Lord, Lord, open to us." But he replied, "Truly I tell you, I don't know you. Keep awake, therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour. For it is as if a man going on a journey summoned his slaves and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. The one who had received the 5 talents went off at once and traded with them and made 5 more talents. In the same way, the one who had the 2 talents made 2 more talents. But the one who had received the 1 talent went off and dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those slaves came and settled accounts with them. Then the one who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 more talents, saying, "Master, you handed over to me 5 talents. See, I have made 5 more talents." His master said to him, "Well done, good and trustworthy slave. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master." And the one with the 2 talents also came forward, saying, "Master, you handed over to me 2 talents. See, I have made 2 more talents." His master said to him, "Well done, good and trustworthy slave. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master." Then the one who had received the 1 talent also came forward, saying, "Master, I knew that you were a harsh man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you did not scatter seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here you have what is yours." But his master replied, "You wicked and lazy slave. You knew, did you, that I reap where I did not sow, and gather where I did not scatter? Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and on my return I would have received what was mine, plus interest. So take the talent from him and give it to the one with the 10 talents. For to all those who have, more will be given, and they will have an abundance. But from those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken away. As for this worthless slave, throw him into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate people one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will put the sheep at his right hand and the goats at the left. Then the king will say to those at his right hand, "Come, you that are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me. Then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when was it we saw you hungry and gave you food, or thirsty and gave you something to drink? And when was it that we saw you a stranger and welcomed you, or naked and gave you clothing? And when was it that we saw you sick or in prison and visited you? And the king will answer them, Truly I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these who are members of my family, you did it to me. Then he will say to those at his left hand, You that are accursed, depart from me into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not welcome me, naked, and you did not give me clothing, sick and in prison, and you did not visit me. Then they also will answer, Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or naked or sick or in prison and did not take care of you? Then he will answer them, Truly I tell you, just as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me. And these will go away into eternal punishment, but the righteous into eternal life. We now have some commentary from Thomas Merton. Here is the bridegroom, related to verse 6. God, our Creator and Saviour, has given us a language in which he can be talked about, since faith comes from hearing, and our tongues are the keys that open heaven to others. But when the Lord comes as a bridegroom, there remains nothing to be said except that he is coming, and that we must go out to meet him. After that, we go forth to find him in solitude. There we communicate with him alone, without words, without discursive thoughts, in the silence of our whole being. When what we say is meant for no one else but him, it can hardly be said in language. What is not meant to be related is not even experienced on a level that can be clearly analysed. We know that it must not be told because it cannot. But before we come to that which is unspeakable and unthinkable, the Spirit hovers on the frontiers of language, wondering whether or not to stay on its own side of the border in order to have something to bring back to other men. This is a test of those who wish to cross the frontier. If they are not ready to leave their own ideas and their own words behind them, they cannot travel further. Little piece from Bishop Barron entitled God in Gift Form, in relation to verses 14 to 30. Here Jesus gives us the challenging parable of the talents. A man goes on a journey, but before leaving, he entrusts his money to 3 of his servants. To one he gives 5 talents, to a second 2, and to a third 1. The first man trades with the 5 talents, the second does the same, and both receive a rich return on their investment. The third man cautiously buries his talent. When the owner returns, he praises the first 2 servants and gives them greater responsibilities. But the third man he upbraids. Think of the talents as everything that we've received from God: life, breath, being, and powers. Because they come from God, they are meant to become gifts. If you cling to them in the manner of the third servant, they don't grow. In fact, they wither away. And this final piece is, it's not the final piece, but this piece is, what is the quality of your love? Again from Bishop Barron in relation to verses 31 to 46. At the end of Matthew 25, we encounter the scene of the Last Judgment. We hear that the specifics are a matter of love concretely expressed. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me. And we know the famous connection that Jesus makes. Truly I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these who are members of my family, you did it to me. There is something awful about the specificity of these demands. This is not love in the abstract, having affection for humanity. It is caring for that person who is homeless, for that person who is ill, for that person who is in prison. We do not take our money, our social status, or our worldly power into the next world, but we do take the quality of our love. You might consider doing an examination of conscience at the end of each day and use as your criterion this passage. Perhaps put it up on your wall or post it next to your bed so that you see it before you go to sleep. Now the final piece from Bishop Barron, entitled You Did It to Me, in relation to verses 31 to 46. Once a rabbi required of Jesus which of the many laws, there are over 600 that govern Jewish life, was the most important. With disarming simplicity and directness, Jesus responded, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the greatest and the first commandment. And a second is like it. You shall love your neighbour as yourself. The mutuality of these two loves is implicit in the entire teaching of Jesus. The absolute love for God is not in competition with a radical commitment in love to our fellow human beings. Precisely because God is not one being among many, but the very ground of the existence of the finite world. Thomas Aquinas would state it in this way: to love God is to love necessarily whatever participation in God, and this is to say the entire world. Perhaps the most powerful evocation of the principle in the teaching of Jesus is the haunting parable of the sheep and the goats in chapter 25 of Matthew's Gospel. Jesus tells the crowd that when the Son of Man comes in his glory to judge the living and the dead, he will separate people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. To those on his right he will say, Come, you that are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I was naked and you gave me clothing. I was sick and you took care of me. I was in prison and you visited me. In their puzzlement, the righteous will ask when they performed all of these acts of love for the Lord. And he will reply, Truly I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these who are members of my family, you did it to me. Then comes the reversal. To those on his left, the king will say, You that are accursed, depart from me into the eternal fire, prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry and you gave me no food. I was thirsty and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger and you did not welcome me, naked and you did not give me clothing, sick and in prison and you did not visit me. As puzzled as their counterparts, these people wonder when they neglected the Lord so thoroughly. Then comes the answer. Truly, I tell you, just as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me. To love Christ is to love the ones whom Christ loves. The very drama of the parable is intended to stir us out of any complacency and beguile us out of any confusion on this score. A man who understood the theology and ethics of Matthew 25 in his bones was Peter Merton, the co-founder of the Catholic Worker Movement. Merton was born in France in 1877, one of 24 children. In the course of his early education, which was supervised by the Christian Brothers, he became deeply inspired by the example of St. Francis of Assisi. In 1909, when the French government turned aggressively against the church, Peter left his native country and eventually began to live a radical sort of Franciscan life, embracing poverty out of love for the gospel, working as a simple labourer during the day, sleeping in skid row shelters at night. During those vagabond years, he was struggling to develop a coherent Catholic social philosophy, a theory of economics and politics thoroughly informed by Matthew 25. He knew that the church had codified that section of Matthew as the corporal and spiritual works of mercy, among which were feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, visiting the imprisoned, burying the dead, counselling the doubtful, praying for the living and the dead. He wondered what society would look like if those ideals were the foundation of the political and social order. He also read with great care the social teaching of the Church, especially as it was articulated in Pope Leo XIII's Rerum Novarium of 1891 and Pope Pius XI's Quadragesimo Anno of 1931. In Pope Leo's text, he discovered the principle that the Pope had borrowed from Thomas Aquinas, namely that while the ownership of private property is allowed, a use of private property should always be for the common good. In Pope Pius's encyclical, he discovered that what has been characterized as a structuring element of all of Catholic social teaching, the principle of subsidiarity, which stipulates that in matters political and economic, there ought always to be a preferential option for the most local level of authority and operation. The unambiguous application of this principle, Moran saw, would prevent individuals and communities from abdicating their direct responsibility for practicing the corporal works of mercy. He wanted to build a society in which, in his words, it would be easier for men to be good. Moran recognized Matthew 25 as dynamite, from the Greek dynamis, a favourite word of St. Paul, by the way. But he worried that we have taken the dynamite of the church, placed it in hermetically sealed containers, and sat on the lids. We have tended, in other words, to see the gospel commands as a matter of private spirituality and not as society transforming power. It is time, he concluded, to blow up the dynamite of the church. As a non-native speaker of English, he was sensitive to peculiar terms of phrase that Anglophones would take for granted. He delighted in the term go-getter, but he wanted at the same time to undermine it. We should turn a nation of go-getters into a nation of go-givers. 1932, just as the Great Depression was getting underway, Peter Moran arrived in New York City. There he met a young social activist and spiritual seeker, recently converted to Catholicism. Her name was Dorothy Day. Dorothy had been a radical and a friend to some of the leaders in the cultural and political avant-garde of the 1920s, including the playwright Eugene O'Neill and the political agitator John Reed. But she had become fascinated with the Catholic Church, especially after the birth of her first child, when she said that she felt a gratitude so great that it corresponded to nothing in this world. When she met Moran, she was looking for a way to combine her radical political commitment to her newfound Catholic faith. The vagabond philosopher was the answer to her prayers. When they met, Peter spoke uninterrupted for 7 hours. Despite this overwhelming loquaciousness, Dorothy was entranced by Peter's vision for a renewal of American society and his recommendation that the revolution should start with the founding of a newspaper that would present Catholic social teaching and the establishment of houses of hospitality where the poor would be welcomed, where the corporal and spiritual works of mercy would be practiced. On May 1st, 1933, Dorothy Day came to Washington Square Park in Greenwich Village and distributed the first edition of the Catholic Worker magazine, selling it for 1 penny a copy, still the price today. Not long afterward, she and Moran set up the first Catholic worker house of hospitality on the Lower East Side of Manhattan and commenced to take care of the poor. Today there are such houses all over the country, and indeed around the world, it's most important to see that neither of these figures could be plainly described as a social worker. Throughout their lives, they attended Mass, assisted at benedictions, participated in retreats, prayed the Rosary, etc., etc., for they saw their radical devotion to the poor in inescapable correlation to their even more radical love of Christ. Someone who operated very much in the spirit of Dorothy Day was St. Teresa of Calcutta. Much of Mother Teresa's day was taken up with prayer, meditation, Mass, Eucharistic adoration, and the Rosary. But the rest of her time, as we well know, was spent in the grittiest work among the poorest of the poor, practicing the corporal and spiritual works of mercy, blowing up the dynamite of the church. Father Paul Murray, the Irish Dominican spiritual writer and sometime advisor to Mother Teresa, relates the following story. He was one day in deep conversation with Mother, searching out the sources of her spirituality and mission. At the end of their long talk, she asked him to spread his hand out on the table, and touching his fingers one by one as she spoke the words, she said, "You did it to me." Thanks for listening.